So we are getting closer and closer to that big test day, which also means we're getting closer and closer to Christmas break. So, you take the good with the bad. Today we're looking at these transport task cards. Now in class, I did let the students work with a partner on them because they are a little bit confusing and a little hard. I'll give you that. So I'm going to be your partner in this if you're working remotely or if you're absent today and you are lucky enough to watch this video. If you haven't caught on yet, I kind of give you a lot of help, we'll say, in these videos whenever it comes to answering questions. So I uploaded them here in the PDF. It might be easier for you to view them if you click on this. I took and put pictures on here as well, but they're a little bit fuzzy at times. I just thought that it looked cool, so I wanted you to see them this way too. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click on this PDF. Actually, what I'm going to do is open this up in a Word document so I can type on it. But if you're viewing it, this is what it'll look like for you. And you are going to be submitting this either in a text box entry, or you can create your own document and just, number it for me so that I know what answers go with which questions. Okay, so give me a second here so that I can get my document opened. You know what? I'm going to open up a blank document because I don't want to mess up the formatting on that one. So we'll open up Word here, get a nice blank document going, and there's my task cards. Okay, so number 1. I'm going to increase the font size over here too. Let's try 16 instead. Explain what happens to animal cells if they are put in fresh water. Which way will the water flow? And I tried to either give you just a picture of what we're talking about or some type of a hint in those diagrams. So you see that there is a cell and it says that it's being lysed. And lysed means that it's actually being burst apart. Now, if it's put in fresh water, that means that there are no particles, no solute particles in the cell or outside of the cell in the environment. Now, inside of the cell, there will be solute particles and there will also be organelles in that cell. So water is going to start rushing into the cell and it's eventually going to burst. So which way will water flow? Water will flow into the cell. Why don't plant cells burst if a lot of water diffuses into them? So here I have distilled water. I have the cell and it's called a plant cell here. And I have the cell wall labeled for you in that diagram. Plant cells don't burst because they have a cell wall. And that cell wall is a really tough cellulose, and that is going to keep them from bursting apart. It gives them a lot of structure. Also makes them very rigid though, so we would not want cell walls. Number 3, saltwater crabs have the same proportion of salt in their cells as the water that they live in. Considering this, what would happen to the cells of a crab if you put it in fresh water? Why? Don't ever do this to a crab. It would be an extremely painful death because you're going to be basically dying from the inside out. So they have salt inside of their cells, and we know that water is going to chase the higher solute concentration. So if I take them out of salt water and put them into fresh water, that is going to cause water to rush into their cells. They're going to go through cytolysis, which means that the cells are going to burst, and this is going to happen because there's a higher solute concentration in the cells than in the environment. Explain what is happening in the following diagram. So here's the initial state, and you can see that the little dots are going to be our solute particles. We have a semi-permeable membrane, which means that it allows some things to cross it, but not other things. And when we look at the final state, we know that this side is less solute particles, this side has more. We see the water levels have changed. So this one is considerably lower, this one is higher. So water is moving to the higher solute concentration. Water is trying to make sure that there is an equal number of space around all solute particles, both these ones on the right side and the ones on the left side. It wants everything to be equal. Water is very nice like that. Number 5, Wallaway is a new general herbicide for aquatic plants. It is effective against freshwater but not saltwater plants. It works by breaking down the cell walls of the plants when they are in a hypotonic environment. What happens to the cells of the freshwater plants after their cell walls are destroyed? Well, if they're in a hypotonic environment, that means water is going to be coming into their cells, so the cells will burst, which means they're going to go through cytolysis. Number 6, you are at the beach and a huge wave comes up and takes you under. This has happened to me multiple times when I was younger. Or you can go body surfing and then you end up getting drowned that way as well, and you scrape your face against the sand on the bottom. You come back up, but not before you drink a large amount of salty ocean water, which is also disgusting and makes you want to gag. What will happen to the cells in your intestines? So you're ingesting a very high solute concentration. And we know water is going to chase the higher solute concentration. So if you drank all this salt water, water is going to leave your cells. And your cells are going to shrink. These ones are kind of cool, I thought, because they give you actual real-life scenarios, and you have to determine what is happening. So there's a few parts to them. Like I said, I really like these questions. I was pretty excited when I came up with them. So your skin is made up of 2 layers, the epidermis and the dermis. The epidermis produces an oily protein that repels water. When you soak in the bathtub for a long time or swim for a long time, the protein is sloughed off. As a result, your skin cells begin to swell from the excess water and they look wrinkled. Is this an example of passive or active transport? Well, this is going to be passive transport. It doesn't require any energy for this to happen. Water is just moving on its own. It's chasing the higher solute concentration, and since that protein is no longer there to protect your skin, water can then move in. Is this an example of diffusion or osmosis? Because we're talking about water movement, we're talking about osmosis. Is the solute content in the skin cell hypotonic or hypertonic to the water in the pool or the tub? Well, if the cells are going to be swelling, that means it's hypotonic. If your skin cells were shrinking, then it would be hypertonic. Blood carries oxygen from your lungs to the rest of your body. As you inhale air with a high oxygen concentration, is drawn into small sacs within your lungs, also called alveoli. The air in the alveoli has a higher oxygen concentration than the blood in the tiny blood vessels surrounding the alveoli. Oxygen will diffuse out of the alveoli and into your blood, and this is how your blood takes oxygen to different parts of your body. So if it's diffusing out, that is going to be an example of passive transport because diffusion is passive. And question B, is this an example of diffusion or osmosis? Well, it says it right up here, oxygen will diffuse. And because we're talking about oxygen moving, oxygen is not water, so it has to be diffusion. It's only osmosis if you're moving water. Does this process require cellular energy? No, it does not. Passive transport does not require energy. Number 9. Let's see. Blood passing through the brain is constantly monitored. If the amount of water in the blood falls below normal, a hormone or chemical message is released into the blood, which passes through the bloodstream to the kidneys. This hormone signals to the kidneys that more water is needed in the blood. Water then diffuses into the blood, so the water content of the blood remains constant. As a result, the urine becomes more concentrated. Is this an example of passive or active transport? So we say water is diffusing out. So water is leaving. Diffusion is passive. And we're looking here, it has a lower than normal concentration. So you're trying to increase that concentration. You're going from high to low. That would be passive. Is this an example of diffusion or osmosis? We're talking about water movement. So it's going to be osmosis. You'll never hear a sentence or read a sentence that says water then osmosises into the blood. It just doesn't work like that. C. Is the blood cell hypotonic or hypertonic to the body's fluid before the brain sends a signal to the kidneys? Well, if the water level is falling below normal, that means that there's not enough water. So it's hypertonic. What might a person do to cause the water content of their blood to fall? Maybe they aren't drinking enough water. Or maybe they're drinking too much pop or coffee or something like that. Your body contains 3 types of white blood cells that do a variety of things to keep you healthy. The most important white blood cell is a granulocyte. When a bacteria cell enters the body, often at the site of a scratch or more serious skin injury, the granulocyte attacks the bacteria cell and engulfs it. The pus that accumulates at the site is an infection consists mostly of these white blood cells. So if you ever were to get an infection and you do have pus coming out of your body in one place or another, that pus is actually your white blood cells. So whenever you're wiping it off, you're actually cleaning up dead white blood cells, which sounds kind of gross. Okay. Getting back to the question here, is this an example of passive or active transport? So we are talking about a bacteria coming in, granulocyte is attacking the bacteria cell and it's engulfing it. That means it is going through endocytosis, and endocytosis is a type of active transport. What is the process of engulfing a cell called? We could say endocytosis or phagocytosis if you want to get really specific with it. What organelle will the bacteria cell be transported to within the cell to be destroyed? The organelle that is our cleanup crew is our lysosomes. Okay, we're almost done here. We're about halfway at number 10. Okay, moving on to 11. A freshwater aquarium plant is placed in a saltwater aquarium. What will happen to the cells of the plant? So if the plant is freshwater, that means it has not that many solutes inside of it. It doesn't have any sodium in there. So water is going to be chasing after the salt in the environment. The cell will shrink. And it's going to go through plasmolysis. Jim is rushed to the hospital after an accident. After a car accident. He has a cut on his leg that is bleeding heavily. The doctors order The doctor orders an IV of saline solution that consists of water and 0.9 grams per liter of sodium chloride, which closely matches the sodium chloride concentration in blood. What type of solution is the saline, hypertonic, isotonic, or hypotonic to the blood cell? If it closely resembles that of blood, they're trying to make it be isotonic. (13) Paramecia are single-celled organisms that live in hypotonic environments. And there's a little picture of a paramecium for you. To assist with homeostasis, paramecia have organelles known as contractile vacuoles. Contractile vacuoles help expel excess water. What would happen to the paramecium if its contractile vacuole stopped working? So that contractile vacuole keeps the water being pushed out. If the cell cannot push water out of itself, then it's going to swell. And eventually it'll burst. (14) Naegleria fowler is a type of amoeba that lives in soil, lakes, streams, and puddles. The amoebas are able to maintain homeostasis when they live in a hypotonic environment. When a person with a weakened immune system encounters the infected water with N. fowler, the amoeba can travel to a person's brain. After Hurricane Sandy, a student wondered if the amoeba could survive in a saltwater environment. Predict what will happen to the amoeba if it is placed into a hypertonic environment. If it's placed into a hypertonic environment, the amoeba should shrink and die. This is a good one here. So question 15, and there's 3 parts to it. I know it says 1, 2, 3. I should have labeled that A, B, C, but I didn't, so I'm just going to do that on my answer sheet. Shelley participated in a lab to investigate cell transport. She placed 6 pieces of potato into 6 beakers of sucrose, sugar solutions, with different concentrations to determine the effect of the solution on the potato. She found the mass of the potato before and after soaking it in the solution. The results are summarized in the data table below. So I cut it in half for you. Instead of giving you all 6 potatoes, I just gave you 3, and I want you to label them as either iso, hypo, or hypertonic. So I tell you the sucrose concentration. We start off at 0. Number 2 has 68, and 3 has 137 grams of sucrose. Now the initial weights of the potatoes, right around 2.55. The final weight is 3.22. So looking at that one, the potato gained weight. So since it gained weight, that would be a hypotonic one. The second one there goes from 2.56. The final weight is 2.56. It did not change. That's isotonic. And the last one, we have 2.55. It actually decreases down to 2.54 because it's getting smaller. That is hypertonic. Name the process by which the contents of the vacuole are being released to the outside environment. It's exocytosis. Name the process of cell drinking or taking in very small molecules. Cell drinking, penocytosis. Name the process of cell eating or taking in very large molecules. Talked about this one a little bit in an earlier question too. Almost done, last 4. Label the following as either iso, hypo, or hyper, and these questions are actually going to be on your test as well, these 3. So here we have our cell. There's a 10% salt solution in the cell, 10% salt solution out of the cell, and it says water goes in both directions. That means it's isotonic. Same question here, but our cell is 10%, and the environment is 20%. Water is moving out, so it's hypertonic. Same question again, but the cell here is 20%, the environment is 10%, water is moving into hypotonic. And what would happen to a grape placed in a bowl of highly concentrated sugar water? Well, if the bowl has a very high concentration of sugar, and put this grape in there. Water is going to chase after the higher solute concentration, so water is going to be leaving those grapes. The grape should shrink. It'll go through plasmolysis. So that is it for these questions here. You'll want to go into Canvas, and it's worth 30 points. You're going to be submitting it either in the text entry, so you would copy and paste your answers, or you can do a file upload to Google Docs. Alrighty guys, that is it for today. I'll talk to you later.